So everybody has heard about the guy who paid someone to marry him, and the guy ended up getting a green card and living happily ever after, maybe got divorced after he became a citizen and is just living in the US happily. Unfortunately, it's much more complicated than that. And what I'm going to be discussing are some practical considerations, especially regarding the timeline and what the worst case scenario looks like if USCIS makes a fraud determination. So I've discussed this in some of my prior videos, but practically speaking, a lot of people think, oh, okay, I can maybe pay someone to marry me, and a year later, we'll go to the interview, we'll make some stuff up, I'll get my green card, and then we'll just get separated. We don't even have to live together during the time. We'll just make a story up, we'll get a joint bank account together, get some joint documents, take some photographs together, and we will be good to go. That could not be farther from the truth. In reality, this process takes much longer than people think. If you've been married for fewer than 2 years, your initial green card is going to be a conditional green card. And after your interview, which can, by the way, take more than 1 year from starting the immigration process to your interview, you'll have to apply to remove the conditions on your residence in most situations. That means 2 years after you get your green card, which is a conditional residence card, you'll have to apply to remove the conditions on your residence, and that involves submitting way more evidence. And if you don't have enough evidence, you will have to submit yourself to another green card interview. And that's a matter of policy. Sometimes interviews are waived if you have enough evidence. Other times, having a lot of evidence isn't enough to prevent you from being interviewed again. A lot of people think that they can do this process pretty quickly, but what I just described can easily take 5 years from start to finish in some situations. And if you don't have real evidence that you're living together and sharing your lives together, it's going to be very difficult to meet your burden of proving that it's a good faith marriage. Now, that might not be enough to dissuade some people. So let's talk about what happens if you get caught engaging in a fraudulent marriage. What happens if USCIS can prove that you're in a fraudulent marriage? Well, they'll bring you to a back room and execute you. Just kidding. That's not going to happen. What will happen is you will be permanently barred from ever becoming a permanent resident in the United States. And the USCIS office, depending on the policies, may transfer the case to immigration court to begin deportation proceedings. And if they begin deportation proceedings, the only defenses you will have available are limited to something called cancellation of removal or relief under the Convention Against Torture, which basically means we won't deport you if you can prove that you'll be subjected to extreme cruelty or torture in the country where you were born. By the way, even if you're granted that case, that type of relief from deportation, you still get a deportation order in the system, but you'll also get an order preventing the government from physically removing you. So it's not a great way to continue living in the United States. So how would something like this actually happen? Well, what I've seen happen is the USCIS officer is really suspicious. They'll schedule a second interview. I've talked about this in my other videos. It's referred to as a Stokes interview, where they separate the two spouses. At this point, the government will put a lot of pressure on the US citizen spouse and be like, oh, did this guy pay you money? This looks really fake. If you come clean, we won't charge you the ridiculous fine for engaging in marriage fraud, and the other consequences that can come along with it, like incarceration. It's a really serious offense. And sometimes the US citizen will just snap and break and admit to everything. And once they admit to it, the government will write a decision denying the green card application under something known as Section 204C. If you ever get a denial decision based on 204C marriage fraud, that's very different from the government denying your green card application because you were not able to prove it's a good faith marriage. Not proving it's a good faith marriage, you get to try again in the future. But if you get a marriage fraud determination, there is no waiver. You can't fix that in the future when you're in another good faith marriage. And I actually just consulted with somebody who had one of these from 20 years ago. He was very young, he made a mistake. All his friends told him, just pay this person. The US citizen went along with it. She received $10,000 and they went to the interview. It didn't go well. They got scheduled for a second interview where they were separated. The government put a lot of pressure on the US citizen wife in that case, and she admitted it. After 3 hours of being interrogated, she admitted that it was a fraudulent marriage and that he paid her $10,000. In the denial decision, the government uses her own words to deny the application. Luckily for this guy, at that time, denied USCIS petitions were not automatically referred to immigration court to begin deportation proceedings. And that's largely a matter of policy and who the president is at that time and who the enforcement priorities for deportation are. So that in a lot of ways, this guy got lucky. But now he's been married to his real spouse for over a decade. They have US citizen children, and he's unable to fix his status permanently. He is permanently barred. There's no waiver and no way for him to ever fix his status by being in a good faith marriage in the United States. What is the takeaway from this video? Well, the number one takeaway is don't ever engage in a fraudulent marriage to apply for an immigration benefit. It is really one of the worst ideas I've ever seen. And I've even consulted with people who got married. And during the consultation, which was confidential, it became clear to me that it's a fake marriage. And I try to gently explain to them, if I was the immigration officer, this is the problem I would see. I would think it's fake. This is what I would do next. And I'm really trying to convince this person that it's a terrible idea. And by the way, that I can't possibly assist them or represent them in any way with a fraudulent marriage. And what I tell them is listen, you haven't applied for the immigration benefit yet. Just don't apply for your green card and get divorced because you haven't engaged in immigration fraud yet. Because you haven't applied for the benefit, you got married, that was a mistake, you should undo that as soon as possible. If you're trying to apply for any immigration benefit based on fraud, just don't do it. Wait until you're in a good faith marriage and then get an immigration lawyer and apply for the whole process without worrying about being permanently barred from ever fixing your status again in the United States. If you need any assistance with an immigration matter that does not involve immigration fraud, please feel free to contact me. I'm always available to consult and assist you with your immigration matters. You can book your consultations directly through my website or by calling my office. And if you're new to my channel, please be sure to subscribe because I put out new videos every week.